sometimes doing the work is resting. You know, I had a lot to work on, more than many. So I was like, I dived into, anything spiritually, psychologically, workshops, retreats, got to do this, got to do that, and I've now got to the point now, it's like, guess what? The work now for me is to sit still for half an hour and do nothing. That is the hardest thing for me. It's in the gentleness and in the tenderness, and the way that we treat the earth is so violent in so many times, and the way we treat our own souls and our own beings is so violent. And how do we transform our behavior to ourselves so it's gentle and loving, and then we'll make those decisions to our families, our friends, our society, and to the earth.
Hello, amazing, all that we are community. How is your week going? It has been a powerful time on planet Earth these recent weeks, and we hope that the episodes of this series have provided some balm, some inspiration, and some activations. I have 4 events to share with you that are taking place very soon for our community. Firstly, online, we have our next live event this Sunday. It's our soul space on the theme of anchoring our gifts. This is free to all members to join, and you're also welcome to come as a non-member if you feel called to just come and spend a part of this Sunday online exploring this theme. Starting just after the solstice, which is a really special time to anchor in new ways of being, we have a live edition of Reclaim Your Intuition, which will include live calls every Wednesday for 6 weeks, as well as games, rituals, and more to support a powerful relationship with your intuition and your inner world and your sense of knowing in your own body. Reclaim Your Intuition is an online journey that I've created, which will begin the Wednesday after the solstice and will take you up to the end of July, so that in this time that we're kind of coming into full summer and that full expression of ourselves, it can also be a powerful time to attune and really connect into the truth of who you are and your relationship with the unseen, and bring those aspects fully alive into your being. Many of you will know that I wrote a book about intuition, and that this topic of how we reclaim it is so dear to me, because I believe that there is so much that can come for our global future from us expanding into these parts of ourselves that we have been disconnected from due to our culture and systems of oppression. And we are offering 2 in-person events in the coming weeks. I can't tell you how special it is to be together in person in these times of digital fatigue and texting and social media. I know that I'm not nourished by connecting in that way, and need to be with other humans to be in that deep space of co-regulation and to open into the realms of the beautiful transformative experiences that can happen when we gather with intention. What I do know about retreats that I've held before and community gatherings is that they are always so open, and they are heart spaces. They're spaces where you can really fully be who you are, drop into your body, share from your heart, and connect with others on a really beautiful level. We have our summer retreat, which is June the 14th to the 16th. And this is a weekend in the Transcendent Forest of Dean, which will be a spacious, nature-based weekend of ritual, grief, and celebration, with beautiful stillness and movement practices in the morning, with times out tree whispering in the forest, smelling the roses in the road gardens, walking the labyrinth, being in rebirth ritual with an ancient spring. It's 2 nights and creates a really nice break away from your day-to-day life to reflect, reconfigure, and re-inspire. And of course, to remember the beauty of who you are. And we have made this as affordable as possible because it's such a special thing to get to go and stay in an intentional retreat space that has been designed to host you and for us to be together, eat together, dream together, it really does do something that is really quite profound. And we have our gathering in Devon, which will be a live podcast with special guests Helena Norberg Hodge, Anthea Lawson, and Jay Spencer Keys on the evening of the 5th of July. And then Saturday, the 6th of July, will be a day retreat, which will be practices with me and spaces to share, followed by a sunset picnic on Dartmoor with a special poem and songs. This will be a chance to either come and explore Devon, if that's something that you've wanted to do, or connect with others that live in Devon over these 3 events. One of the things that I found about Devon is it's such a huge area and everyone gets quite insular. And so having these events that bring everyone out of their little cottages and together is really, really connective and can then open up to deeper relationships and collaborations and all of that. I hope to spend time with you through one or all of these happenings. You can find the details if you go to our website, allthatweare.org, and click on events, and that will take you through to the calendar where you'll find links to all of these and how you can join them. In the meantime, I would love to hear how this series is stirring for you. So please do write a little note or do a review or send me a little voice note or something, because it's so lovely to hear from you. For me, this is a community project. It's not a broadcasting project. It's about us sharing in the wisdom and the inspiration and different perspectives and transforming together, learning from each other and being on this journey of life together. My guest this week is Zoe Tyron, a mama, activist, speaker, and artist known for her work with Indigenous communities. She is the founder of One of the Tribe Journeys, a travel company that offers privately led immersive experiences with Indigenous communities in the Ecuadorian Amazon and Andes. Through One of the Tribe, Zoe has led journalists, filmmakers, celebrities, and more to witness places in the world few will ever see. She has field-produced documentaries in the Amazon with subjects ranging from the impact of the Chevron case in the northern Ecuadorian Amazon to a film looking at pink dolphins known as wisdom keepers. Zoe has acted as a cultural liaison between Indigenous and Western leaders since 2006, when she first began living with the Achar tribe in the Amazon. Since then, Zoe has lived and worked with the Achar, Shuar, Quichua, Sapara, and Waorani peoples across Ecuador. She has supported education, health, and economic capacity building projects, advocated for environmental and constitutional rights in the Ecuadorian constitution, and worked closely with Indigenous partners on the largest environmental lawsuit in history. She is a cultural ambassador for the Stop Ecocide campaign and ambassador for the Sacred Headwaters Initiative, an alliance of 30 Indigenous nations in Ecuador and Peru with a shared vision to permanently protect 86 million acres of bioculturally diverse tropical rainforests. In this episode, entitled Wellsprings of Dreams, we explore the themes of Amazonian cultures, environmental activism, and motherhood as we speak to the question, how do we live in intimacy with ourselves, each other, and nature? We discuss environmental activism and reconnecting to ancestral land and practices, Indigenous-led conservation, cultural preservation, and wisdom in the Amazon rainforest, Indigenous practices of dreaming, healing, and living in community and in harmony with Earth, Amazonian spirituality, dreams, and plant medicine, addictions and intimacy in the Western world, and motherhood. I hope that this conversation fills you with the remembrance of your divine connection and the love that you have for all beings and all of life. Welcome to All That We Are, with me, your host, Amisha Gadiali. On this show, we explore the weave between activism, the sacred, creativity, and regeneration. the spaces where our inner and outer worlds dance. From healing trauma to nature connection, to new technologies to ancient wisdom, it's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a more beautiful future. Despite the challenges we face as a global community or the pressures we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to listen, to ask ourselves the big questions, and to share what we are already doing and envisioning, we create the futures of our wildest dreams. And we begin to embody all that we are becoming, and all that is possible. Zoe, it is an absolute delight to be with you in this moment and welcome you to all that we are. Thank you for coming to share with us here today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to sit down and chat with you.
And we've had the most exquisite morning in deep prayer together in order to come here and share from that deepest place within us, but also of this time and of this earth. I'd love to begin by asking you what's alive for you around this question. What are the futures of your wildest dreams?
I love this question. It's such a beautiful one. And I think so often I forget to stop and ask that question because I can get so involved in the now and in the work that I do and worrying about what's going on right now and what the negative possibilities of the future are in relation to the Amazon and the earth. And so it was so beautiful to reflect and consider this. And, you know, I'm so lucky to have spent time in Indigenous communities and seeing how community and connection works. And so for me, my vision of a delicious future is where every being on this planet, human, plant, animal, can all have that experience of living deeply connected in community and remembering who we are, that we are nature. And I think that, you know, I get glimpses of that now and again, and I do a lot of practice to try and get that more and more. But if a great number of us were all living in that, we would care so much more for the earth, for each other, and live a much more joyful existence. Everything we do would be mindful and thoughtful and loving. And that's the future that I would like for everyone.
It sounds simple, and yet we've made it really difficult.
Incredibly. And there are so many blocks to that, you know, on a giant scale and on a personal scale. And, you know, I think as an activist, I'm always, you know, thinking of, you know, in my field in the Amazon, you know, how I can best serve and best be of use. And it can sometimes seem so overwhelming. And everything that's going on right now at this time, the wars, the devastation, the trauma on a global scale. And sometimes I think bring it back to that simplicity of what can I do here right now? How can I heal that in myself, which is broken, you know, on a micro level, so that I can show up and do my tiny bit. You know, there's that beautiful, which you've probably heard of, the imaginal cells. Have you? Mm. Yeah, I love that. I don't know if your listeners have heard of it, but it's that by the evolutionary biologist Elizabeth Sartoris, you know, that the caterpillar consumes, and then it gets to a point of, you know, overflowing of consumption and goes into its chrysalis, and then it melts into this sludge. And from that comes these imaginal cells that the system tries to destroy because it's not, you know, it's alien to them. But each one of these tiny cells, they keep living, and then they feel each other, they're drawn to each other. And once they come together, that's in the union of those cells, that's where the butterfly comes from. And I think that's the times that we're in right now. You know, each one of us is that imaginal cell. And for me, when I get overwhelmed with the state of the world and where we're at, it's like just coming back to what can I do to heal me so that I can be that channel from the divine or from the earth, and remember who each one of us truly is.
And in that, I feel a sense of purpose in the overconsumption that we live in. If we can then make it to the next stage and allow ourselves to become that goo and like really let go, then so much does become possible. And it's not always easy to remember that. And I feel myself in that cycle of transformation so many times. Sometimes it happens multiple times in a day. Sometimes I get stuck in one part of it. And sometimes I get to really experience, you know, the beauty of being the butterfly. And sometimes I feel myself the hungry caterpillar. And sometimes the sludge of just like, woof, like, yeah. And if we can remember that that's a process, and to always just be present to that part of the process that we're in, so much can happen from there.
Definitely. And I think particularly the sludge, there's the fun in the consumption, it's like that locking down of some of the feelings, like the addictive world that we live in, the consumption, the more, stuffing the feelings with food or with drugs or behaviors. And you're not feeling when you're in that state. I've definitely had that path in my life where I've always been a big feeler. And so, I discovered all the addictive natures very early on in life and, tried to suppress those feelings, keep it down. And so it's quite a nice state to be in when you're in that suppressed state, totally distracted. Not nice. That's the incorrect. It's a state. But then that, moving into the sludge, the courage that it takes to move into that sludge of not knowing, and the humility of being in that, and the messiness of being in that. And I think, moving into that not knowing, and that the grace that comes from that. And then you see those little sparkles of light, and you see we've been talking about, families of choice. You see those lights when you meet them, and you're like, okay, here we are, we're the allies, this is the tribe, this is the family, these are my peoples. And that's just heaven.
Mm. When you were talking about the addiction, the sirens went off in the background just at that moment. And it's like, just like bringing that like urgency to what that state really is.
Mm-mm.
And there is this possibility to move through into something else, but it really does involve being courageous enough to let go of what we know and let go of what's become so normalized in Western culture.
Yeah. What is normal is not what's healthy anymore. If you're living in a healthy culture, normal is healthy. But our culture is it's so on an addictive path. It's so on a path of greed. And so normal, I don't want to be normal anymore. I used to, when I was a child, I often felt I didn't fit in. And now I kind of love that. I don't want to fit in with the current paradigm. Finding community that is healthy and learning about that. And I think for me, life is a constant path of, always being curious, always learning about new ways of being and new ways of doing things, and trying them out and making experiments. We'd have to get it right immediately, but having the courage to go, hey, I've got this idea. This is a solution for something that ails us. Are you in? And finding those people to go, let's give this a go, is just, it's an incredible time to be living in that respect.
What do you see happening in the Amazon and how that affects all of planetary life?
Well, many of us know that we're reaching, the scientific side is that we're reaching a tipping point. And, everybody knows of the Amazon as the lungs of the earth. I also think of it as it's the heart of the earth. It's from a scientific perspective, it's a giant pump. There's all the waters of the Amazon rivers, and then there's 4 times the amount of those waters in the atmospheres above the Amazon basin. So it's this huge pump that's going on between the Andes Mountains and the sea. And this pump moves weather systems and affects them all over the Americas. So we want to keep that balance, because without that pump, the heart will no longer be pumping the blood around that whole system. But also for me, it's also like the womb of the earth, that even when you're in it, it's like under that canopy, it's like moist and dark and rich and vibrant, and there's life everywhere. And so, I've been lucky enough to be visiting there for 18 years in person. I definitely dreamed about the forest since I was a little girl. And so it was the last 18 years I've been visiting it. And I've seen the destruction over that time. And I remember actually way back when I was 12 years old, sitting in geography class and hearing about the destruction of the Amazon. And, we were all taught that. And I assumed that by the time I actually got to go there, something would have been done about it. Surely it didn't make sense that we would allow this to happen. And to see with my own eyes the continued destruction. And it was it was a terrible moment when I just suddenly was like, but this is not fair, this is not just. Because I also grew up in a world where, like, if you're a good person and did good things, then good things happened, and that the world was inherently just. And to see what was going on there was devastating on a real deep soul level. And right now, we see in the news the fires are burning. It's a very wet system. It's the rainforest. And yet we have man's influence on it. And it is through greed, through deforestation for soy plantations or for cattle, for oil, for logging, that we've cleared so much of it that already this pump is beginning to fail. And it's really, really terrifying. But I get hope from the indigenous people, the ancestral custodians of this land, who know on a deep, deep, profound level that they and the forest are one. And that gives me incredible, incredible hope. There's no difference between forest preservation and cultural preservation for them, and the spiritual context of that as well. It is all one for that, and they embody that in their being. Even though it looks terrifying from the outside, and I've worked on the case against Chevron in the northern Ecuadorian Amazon, which is ongoing and horrific, and that's only one case of horrific pollution and genocide of indigenous peoples and indigenous wisdom, and that's going on in many, many places. And now roads are coming in the areas that I work in. I used to be 110 miles from the nearest road. And now they're cutting through the northern part of the forest and they're bringing the roads in, and that's the end of life as it's known there. But there is hope. There is hope. So many people are awakening, and the indigenous people are, going through a time of great transformation as well. And that's been really fascinating for me to watch over the last 18 years. So I had this dream that, always that I wanted to go to the jungle, and I had no idea how I was going to get there. And then I had a big relationship breakup, and I was like, well, if not now, when? And I had no idea how I would get to do it. But as you know, when we are open to the divine and say, show me the way, incredible coincidences happen to get us there. And I had a moment on the edge of the street in London, actually, where pouring rain, and I was working in a job that I thought would be helpful, but wasn't that helpful. And I had this moment of just despair, and I was weeping in the pouring rain, and I looked up and I said, show me the way. Like, I want to be of use. I want to be of service. I want to go to the jungle. And the next day I got a call from someone asking me to go and take part in a symposium on environmental sustainability, spiritual fulfillment, and social justice. And I went, and then I was invited to go and train to be a facilitator of that. And then on that, I met a woman on the last day who said, I'm going to the Amazon next week. There's one space left on the trip. Would you like to come? And I just had that, shivery, full body, feeling. And I quit my job. I sold some shares that my mother had left me when she died. And I went to the jungle. And I just knew that was where I was meant to be and what I was meant to be doing. And I felt it was so alien. The first day I arrived there, that the smells, the feel, everything was so alien to me. And yet I had such a feeling of homecoming. And, this is what the Achwa, who's one, I work with many different indigenous groups, but the Achwa are my great loves. They say that this forest is not just for us, it's for all of humanity, it's for all of you, it's for everybody. And I love that, because it did feel like a homecoming to me, even though it was so, so alien. I was then invited to stay there to teach in the local school, because that was the only way they would let an outsider in. And I felt like I was a terrible teacher, But now, 18 years on, every community I go to in Atwell territory, someone will come up to me and say, "Hello, teacher, you taught me English." And that's all they can say. Those two sentences, like, yep. And to see those children now as leaders who are navigating this incredible change. A couple of generations ago, there was no contact with the outside world at all. The actual warriors, they fought and they would kill anyone who came, and they were never conquered. So now they're navigating huge changes as the modern world comes in, and seeing the grace with which they do that. It's incredibly hard for many of them, but seeing that gives me incredible hope, and seeing the initiatives that they're coming up with, and the beautiful formation of allyship happening is just really, really beautiful. So I feel hope.
Can you share more about some of those initiatives and how they are embracing these changes?
Yeah, I mean, I was reflecting this morning, I was thinking about an Atwell concept, which is this concept of anik, which basically means like a spiritual friendship. So very sort of sacred friendship that an Atwell person will make with, in the olden days, with someone in an enemy camp or an enemy village. And this was like, you would care for them and you would protect them in times of war, and you would be sort of a link between you and that person. So therefore through enemy lines, through the villages. And I was thinking about that concept this morning, thinking how like there's so many examples of anik friendships now between indigenous people and people from the West. And one of the things I'm super excited about, so one of the communities I work in, a village called Chiramensa in the Ecuadorian Amazon. So it's down near the border with Ecuador and Peru. And the Atwell have 62 different communities of that land. And Chiramensa has 10,000 acres of land. And the leaders came up with this idea that they wanted to conserve and protect this, and particularly from the advent of roads, logging, oil. And they knew that they had to partner with us, with the outside world, in order to do that. So there's been this incredible initiative called Jaguar Credits, which is birthed by the visions of, the elders. When I first went there 18 years ago, we would drink, and they still do this to this day, every morning at 4 a.m. they drink Wayusa tea and they talk about their dreams. And I remember sitting there by the fire and hearing the elders talk about these connections and this sort of friendship path that needed to be formed. And that's why they wanted to learn English. They wanted to learn English so that they could communicate with us and educate us on, the right way of being. Now to see the grandchildren of these guys creating these Jaguar credits, and the idea is that, you buy a credit, which is like 88 US cents. And with that, you're protecting the symbol of the forest, the jaguar. Because when the forest is healthy, when the culture of the people is healthy, when the spiritual balance of that landscape is healthy, then the jaguars thrive. And so rather than having carbon credits, you're having credits that are to support the earth and to support the flourishing of the whole ecosystem with the jaguar at its apex. And to see the guys there, they've got their internet, their Wi-Fi satellite dish, and they're there, they're mapping now their landscape, they're monitoring the wildlife, they're making choices. And this is what's so amazing as a community. So the choices back 20 years ago, well-meaning foundations would go in and say, we think you need this. We're going to fundraise, we're going to give you that. And now to see the young leaders going, no, this is what we need. We need this. This is what's important to us, and this is what we're going to protect. And giving us in the outside world an example of that way of being. And so they're monitoring, they're choosing not to hunt for protein anymore. So they're choosing to have, fish ponds where they're going to grow fish that they can get their protein sources. And so these credits are helping to support all those things. They're supporting Indigenous-led education initiatives. And it's just so fantastic to see and to be an allyship in that. And everyone involved in the Jaguar Credits project, it's just one little project. And at this moment, it's a pilot project. So it's launching tomorrow. And this is just in the village of Chiramensa. But if that goes well, which I hope it will do, we're trusting it will, then it'll be rolled out into other communities. And right now it's the early stages, it's an experiment, and we're all like in it together. We're like, we're passionate about this forest and how do we save it in the best way. And so we'll see how it goes. And this is the thing, it's just being humble enough to go, does this work, doesn't this work? We've still got, foundations involved in the governance, or the receiving of money comes into Regen and into Fundación Pachamama and then goes out into the communities. But then with the communities, they're deciding whether they can handle that, and they can handle the marketing, and they can handle the communication with the outside world as well. And so that's one exciting one that I'm super proud to be a part of. And I bought my credits today, which is really exciting.
Amazing. I'm going to get some.
And to know that, like, yes, this is a great mentor of mine, Lynn Twist, talks about, the soul of money. And if we can't get there to the area that moves us deeply, to whether it be to a war zone, women and children suffering, the Amazon, where our heart is drawn. And she really shifted my understanding of my position with money. She was like, your money can be that energy to create change in that place. So to know that my cents are going into the hands of, the youth in Sharon community who are out there mapping and monitoring their land, looking for the great trees, protecting the kapok, it feels just really, really yummy. And then also there's another incredible project again, this is what's glorious, because again, this is birthed from the dream world, the Atwara dream culture. Everything comes to them through visions and dreams. And like I said, this beautiful ceremony that's at 4 a.m. every morning, although the elders, because they're more badass, get up at 3 o'clock every morning. And every morning they drink
to set the space for when everyone else comes in.
It's incredible. And it's so Wayusa is a caffeine producing holly plant. It's similar to yerba mate, it's sort of cousin of it, but it only grows in the Ecuadorian Amazon. It's just that beautiful liminal space between night and day. And you sit around the fire with your family and you drink your Wayusa and you all share your dreams. And the elders will analyze those dreams in the context of your family, in context of you. So it might be that you are going to go out into the chakra of the manioc garden and you'll be given signs by what to plant, what to harvest through your dreams. And as a woman, you'll also have dreams that will inform your husband's hunting abilities, which is rather wonderful. And, for example, if they dream of, this is a funny one, if the men dream of sexual relations, it means they'll be bitten by a snake and they must not go into the jungle, but they must stay home and weave a basket or make a comb instead. So it's all these like really funny ways that they analyze the dreams, which is amusing when they try and analyze our dreams from the outside world.
Well, I was just feeling how incredible in the West we have this whole unspoken about porn addiction that's like at the root of all of our intimacy. I'm just feeling how incredible it would be if people were being bitten by snakes, so that there was a real like pulling back into a centeredness around sexual power and sexual expression. And I love that in other cultures that are more connected, there's such a direct response between what's happening in the inner world and what's happening in the outer world, and how that pulls one back into complete presence with the sacred.
Yeah. You brought up porn addiction. I think it's so indicative of our culture right now. Back in the day, there was alcoholism or there was drug addiction. And now it's like that subtlety of the process addictions, the dopamine addiction, and something that's so sacred. That beautiful, when you're having sex with someone in a divine, ceremonial, delicious way, that you are one with the divine. It's a ceremony, it's a ritual, it's a beautiful connection with the divine, and how, as a culture, even that we have crushed the ability to connect in that way. So many young men and women are having that be their first understanding of what sexual connection is and what intimacy is. And I think it's indicative of our fear of intimacy, because again, so many of us, and I see this in the jungle as well, like when I had my daughter 6 years ago, the only sort of understanding I had of mothering was the way that I'd seen in the Atwara culture, and seeing that beautiful attachment, and living in a culture where the child immediately goes onto the mother's breast and is carried by that mama for months and months, even years, and then given to a younger sibling. And there's that fullness, which allows, which gives you, I think, your understanding of the connection with the divine, that connection with mama gives you that understanding of how that connection with the divine can be. And I think so many of us have a fractured connection with our mamas, and therefore we find it so hard to connect with the divine. That also spills into these sort of addictions and porn addiction. It's fear, get down to the basis of it. And it's heartbreaking when you think of what that is like for, and I have many friends who are in recovery from porn addiction. It's just, in hearing them speak about when they're in recovery from that and reclaiming their sexuality, reclaiming their connection with the divine, because all addiction cuts off that connection. It just absolutely shuts it down completely. And so that sort of, that finding that connection with the divine, with the self, through sexuality, through prayer, through all these other, beautiful modalities is wondrous.
I watched a video recently, a doula and birth keeper, it was called Kemi, had put out, and it was showing a lion with her cub, a gorilla with her baby, an elephant with a baby elephant sleeping on top of her, and all of these different animals, and how close the babies are. And you wouldn't dare take a lion cub from a lioness. And yet that's the culture that we're in Western society, where I was then reading the comments and people were sharing about how nurses kept taking their baby and putting it into the incubator tub thing. Not even the incubator, but just
those cots, those plastic cots.
tub that they have.
Yeah.
And a perfectly healthy baby saying, telling them off for holding their baby. And this particular mother was sharing that she just kept going and picking up the baby. She kept getting told off.
Yeah.
And it's why anyone would be trained to tell off a mother who wants to hold her newborn child. And in this case, the nurses eventually gave up, because every time they took the baby off her and put it in the tub, the mother would go and get the baby again and bring it back. And eventually they were like, okay. But I just find it so frightening that we've normalized these kinds of practices when it's just so natural to keep not just our babies close, but each other close. And we've come into this whole psychological war around codependency and attachment and abandonment, all of these things, when actually we're here to be together. We're not here to be these I don't need anything from anyone because actually I can just buy it.
Yes.
We're not here for that. And so I really just want to honor anyone in the West that is standing up to that culture and saying, we need each other. And that is the path that we're really on here.
Yeah, I hear. I so agree with you so deeply. I definitely, when I had my daughter, I was clear after, and one of the reasons I first went to the Amazon as well, I was I wanted to go there to learn what I could do to support the forest, using my incredible privilege of being a Western woman to support the earth in some way. But also, I'd read this incredible book years and years ago called The Continuum Concept, which is about indigenous style child rearing in the Amazon. And I'd gone on to study anthropology as a result of that book. And I knew, as a result of my own upbringing, that something wasn't right in the way that I was brought up, and that, I had 2 alcoholic parents that can contribute, but my Western culture was not healthy. And I wanted to learn what a healthy mother looked like. And I put off having children for a long, long time. I had my daughter at 43 because I kept saying, I've got to heal myself more. I've got to understand more. And then it was finally okay, she's like, I'm coming in now, ready or not.
And we're going to heal together.
We're going to heal together. It was so beautiful. But I think that they taught me so much, because those mamas, and I think we need to remember that as women, our intuition is so powerful. And no woman says, I feel intuitively that I want to be apart from my baby. You hear people say, oh, I didn't want to, but I had to, or, I had to, or I wasn't able to breastfeed. And this is a big one as well. I think so many women feel shame that if they want to breastfeed, that they're not able to. And I think that is never the fault of the woman. I feel very passionate about this. It's the fault of our society, because a mother of a newborn, like many cultures in East Asia, in India and Africa, you have that special time around the birth, the fourth trimester, where you're cocooned as your energies are still so intertwined, and you're cared for and you're fed nourishing foods, and you don't worry. And of course, you're lying there snuggled with that baby, the communication going on between your skins and your energies, breast milk flows. But you bring in the fear, the financial worries, loneliness. So many mothers in our culture experience such deep loneliness in those first few months, and it just breaks my heart. And right from that word go, I think we could change the world by changing the way that mothers and newborns are held in our culture.
Absolutely.
And we know that trauma comes through right from in vitro. It's sort of those first, and how beautiful a culture we'd have if those mothers and children were tended to, like, the preciousness that they are, allowing them to go forward without that, the attachment issues and as you said, worrying about, like, oh, am I being compassionate and loving, or am I being codependent? And I think if we are still enough to really check in, we always know. A dear friend of mine is currently looking after her daddy, who's 90 years old. And some would say she said, is it codependence, or is it that we were talking about this? And I'm like, I think it's asking ourselves, who do we want to be in the world? Like, on our deathbed, who do I want to be? Do I want to be the person who, holds my mother as she's dying? Do I want to spend months or years caring for her before she goes? Do I want to be that person? Or do I want to be individual and strong and separate? Because we're not. We're herd animals. Humans are. We're meant to be together. We're meant to support each other. We're meant to feel for each other and care for each other. Not, in the case of codependency, to the detriment of ourselves. But, I think it's a really important conversation to have and to feel.
It's also one that I feel there's not a straight line. I am caring for my mother, and it's beautiful and it's intense and it rips me apart sometimes. And sometimes I don't feel balanced and I haven't slept. It's hard, just like when you have a newborn that's screaming in the night. You can't be in a space all the time where you're perfectly nourished yourself.
No.
And a healer told me that I was codependent with my mother, and I was like, possibly. And how else am I able to be there with full love and not be affected by what she's affected by it, to not be moved by it, to not be, it's not that we always have this luxury of being like fully just in our like power and our strength and our joy and our fullness. For me, it's the same as being fully present and in relationship with this planet and with the earth. And sometimes what is happening with humanity will bring me to my knees in grief. And I'm okay with that because I'm here to feel, to process, to know that the energy moves through and it's not permanent. And so one day I might be completely taken by the grief that I feel for humanity, but I understand that I'm actually processing it and I'm moving that energy. And that might mean that I'm more nourished the next day or not, but it's also like letting go of an obsession that I will always be like my fullness, because if there's so much sickness on this planet, of course it's going to come to us. And how can we alchemize anything if we are always like keeping it at arm's length? I don't know, some might say this is an unhealed, like codependent speaking, and perhaps, but I feel that sometimes if we want to be intimate with anything in life, that we are allowed to step into that space where we affect each other. Because we affect each other so much. You and I experienced that in the most beautiful way today, where we affected each other in that space of divine centered receiving by being able to connect with each other's experience and then deepen into ours. And that will happen when I'm with someone that's sad or unwell, yeah, then I'll have a practice in order to transmute and alchemize that so I don't carry it through everywhere. But I'm okay with being affected by others and being affected by life. And sometimes someone's sadness, I'll sit with it and I'll pray with it months after I've sat with them. And that's also part of being in relationship.
Definitely. And I think, Paul Hawkins said, that this term of blessed unrest, like there's that holding those both pieces, because you are powerful, strong and magnificent, and you've got an epic heart and you feel things deeply. And I think that that duality, they've got to be separate. It's like, no, I think these times call for having both, having the great courage to feel deeply. It's so much easier just to, in my case, in the older days, to take a drink or a drug to squash that feeling. But to have the courage to show up each day. And I remember in my early recovery, I felt as I was walking around without my skin on. When I put down those tools of addiction, which were like a medicine, that was the best medicine I had access to at that point. I have to be, and I think that's the thing, to be compassionate to oneself. That's all I knew, and it kept me alive because it kept the feelings at a low enough level that I could deal with it. And now, 28 years has gone by of being sober. Now, I've got the tools to deal with those big feelings. And I think it's incredibly courageous. It's so courageous to show up and to feel. And again, the energy of the whole globe right now, there's so much pain, there's so much heartache. And I think if we keep the blessed, if we keep that connection with the divine, we can be held in those. And we held each other in that. I think I never want to not be deeply moved. My close friends and beloved jokes, I can cry over an advert on the television because I do feel deeply. So it's knowing, okay, what will I expose myself to and what will I allow myself to feel deeply about, because I can't control it, and it's beautiful actually being the mama of a tiny person. And I've seen it so many times with her, I'll feel in her energy, and this can be even when she was a tiny baby, if she had eaten and she was dry and she was clean and all the things, but sometimes there'd be this energy in her body and these feelings coming up. Even when she was pre-verbal, I could feel there was stuff going on. And, she couldn't speak, she couldn't express it. And then this big cry would come out. And just holding in my arms saying, I hear you. I'm not sure what this is about, but I love you and I've got you, my darling, and I'll listen to you. And it was really hard for me to do that because I had never been listened to when I was a little girl in that way. It'd been, there's a reason it's called a pacifier, to stop the big feelings. And that was incredible work for me to be able to sit with her big feelings. And as she wailed and bawled and just be present with her and not try and stop it. And it was remarkable. Always that would happen before a big growth spurt, before she sat up for the first time or rolled over the first time or before she first ate. And so she was my great teacher in that. It's like, and also if you watch a 3-year-old have a tantrum, they get right into it. They kick and scream and wail and they don't care who's seeing them. They just rah and get it out of the body. And then, and then literally, artists would get up and she'd go and be, absolutely polite and glorious and wonderful. And I'd be like, what was that? And that's such a great teaching that sometimes even as adults, like, and my beloved and I do this to each other. It's like, do you need a big cry? Do you need to scream into a pillow, baby? Do you because we can feel that and being able to recognize that in the other and sit with those big feelings, like, that is such a gift to be able to do for each other.
And often I find that I need the presence of another to move those energies through, that they can kind of get a bit stuck and I can't quite get them out. And then I need someone to look me in the eyes with love. And then it's like, whoa.
Then the floodgates open, like, whoa.
Yeah, or there's a space for the rage or whatever it is. But suddenly it's like to be seen in it allows it to move. And we had this beautiful experience this morning of being in a beautiful divine space and then being asked to go and scream under a waterfall and to go from bliss to that deep, deep anger and rage that we have for what's happening in the world. And then straight from that, and both of us made noises that we'd never heard before.
Yeah. It's like, what is that? Yeah.
And then within 10 seconds, we were under another waterfall where we were celebrating life and joy. And it does just come if we allow it.
Yeah.
We can access it.
And I think our bodies are so wise. We know this through, the great work of Peter Levine in somatic experiencing, through EMDR, like all these beautiful trauma therapies, through breath work, which is spectacular, through plant medicine. The body is so wise, but it also stores all these rages that we didn't let out, these pains that we held inside, these, all of those are stored in us. And so to give sound to those, to let it out of the body, we are, liberating ourselves from those stuck traumas. And it's so important to, I've been so lucky to work with incredible practitioners of all of the above, and to scream it out, to cry it out. It's so important. And to laugh, and as you said, and to laugh as well. It's like those two, the crying and the laughing, the two ways of getting it out of the body so that we can be more truly authentically who we are, not run by old histories, old traumas, and old ways of being.
Thank you for tuning in. If you are enjoying this episode, do join our membership. For a small contribution, you can be part of our community, where we deepen the conversation and offer spaces of learning and embodiment. As a member, you are a patron supporting the making of this show, keeping the episodes full length, free and accessible for all. And you receive a number of benefits, such as monthly soul space, going deeper sessions, access to our library of workshops, and discounts on all our online and in-person experiences. Our membership is what makes us able to make this show and stay advertising free in a world that is always trying to sell us stuff we don't need. Head to allthatweare.org/membership to find out more and join today. I want to come back to the dreaming and the visioning and the prophecy. This feels so missing from Western dominant culture. It's such a beautiful aspect of Indigenous tribal cultures. And I would love for you to share more around how you've experienced that in different communities and what comes through. And
I studied anthropology and I studied initiation rituals in Papua New Guinea, actually not far from here. But my main area that I work is in the Amazon and with the Amazonian indigenous peoples. So I can speak to a little bit about them. But there's this beautiful prophecy that you may have heard of the eagle and the condor. That many of your listeners may have heard, but for those that don't, I'll fill you in a bit. That there's this prophecy that time is split up into 500-year periods called patakuchis, and they're governed either by the eagle, which is more masculine, more brain-centered, more technological, and then there's the condor, which is more feminine, more grounded, more earthy, more of the earth and more of the heart. And we've seen since the time of Columbus, we've been in the time of the eagle, and they both have great value. And look at from the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, look at what has happened in the modern world. And before that, it was the time of the condor. And the prophecy said that we have now entered a new Patakuchi, which will be the first time in humanity's history that the eagle and the condor will fly together in the skies. It's so beautiful. We can see that again with all these allyships of connection, of friendship across different cultures, ways of being, ways of thinking. We can also see the opposite. There's so much divisiveness going on in the world. I sit here on the COVID thing. I sit there on the COVID thing. Here on Israel, here on Palestine, here. There's, it seems that like the shadow forces really want that separation and the othering.
It's their fault.
Yeah.
It's their fault. It's their fault. It's them. It's them.
And there's no personal accountability. It's like them, other. And when I'm in that situation, when I'm in a state of judgment, it's because I'm not feeling I'm feeling unworthy. I'm feeling unlovable. I'm feeling not good enough. When I'm feeling full and whole, I can see the beauty in the other. When I'm feeling, not my best self, that's when I get into judgment. That's when I get into othering because I'm unworthy and I need to feel better than, and I feel less than. So what's so beautiful about this prophecy of the eagle and the condor, it's about that unity of difference, that bringing together the masculine and the feminine, those that still remember their connection with the earth and those that are technologically more minded. It's all these beautiful, it's like, find that is the most opposite of you, the most other, and connect with it. And the magic that happens when you bring that together is remarkable. And I love that about that prophecy. And you could see examples of that prophecy happening in so many ways and places around the world. And in the Achua culture, like I've said, and also many others, the Sapara culture, Quichua also drink Wayusa every morning, but they're not as dream informed as the Achua. But actually the Sapara are very interesting because they're like the hippies of the Amazon. So the Achua are warriors and warlords, and the Sapara, they lived sort of nearer the edge of the forest. And the Sapara, there's only 3 remaining speakers of the language left, sadly, because of the fact that they're the hippies of the Amazon, because they were always involved in dreaming, visions, ceremonies, and so spiritually open. And they were pacifists, which meant that when the rubber tappers came, they enslaved them. It meant when the oil companies came, they sort of came straight into their land, and more, warrior type tribes overtook their land. But they're still there, and they're sharing their wisdom and their dreams in a remarkable way. A dear friend of mine, Minari Shwiga, he is the son of the Jaguar shaman, and his mama, Mukasawa, is she's one of the last remaining speakers of the Sapara language, from a long, long line of very beautiful shaman. And it was shown to them in dreams and visions that this sacred knowledge that they hold of the medicine of the plants, of the earth, of the spirit world, which has always been kept so close within their community, is now time to go out into the outside world. And Minari speaks so beautifully about this. He says that because they're so deeply connected with nature and the cycles of nature and the life and the death and the morphing of nature, the evolution of nature, that he's quite calm when he speaks about the fact that the Sapara are on the way to extinction. We are leaving. We are going to be leaving this planet soon. And we're going to evolve, and we're going to transform, and we're going to share our wisdom and knowledge with, the outside world. And then those people who awaken from their dreamlike state will take that further and further and further. And so, in fact, they will never die, because this energy, this knowledge, this connection with the earth through them out to us will keep on living. And I mean, the generosity of that sentiment and the way of view is remarkable. And the Achua say the same thing. They said to me, one of the elders said, but even millionaires and billionaires need fresh water and fresh air to breathe and to drink. And so we are fighting this fight, not only for our grandchildren, but for their grandchildren as well. And that incredible, I mean, it's so humbling and awe-inspiring that you could have that amount of grace towards the destruction of the Western world upon their ecosystems. Again, many, many years ago, the Achua were warriors. And not many, many years ago. I mean, 35 years ago. Still in the early days when I first went there were still active warlords and warriors then. That was 18 years ago. Even though they'd had contact previously, there was still some of the old boys were still out there doing their things. And, for them, the dream world and the vision world is as real as this world right here. So what goes on in the hour of Wayusa in the morning is sacrosanct. And so, for example, if you dream a dream that says you're going to go out and create war, then you will go out from Wayusa straight and you will do that. So it can be quite dark. Amazonian spiritually it really has, like Balinese, the dark and the light. It's not all peace, love, and mung beans, and I love that.
And in India too.
Yes. Yes.
Because that is actually the world real. That we live in.
Yes.
We are in duality and in spectrum of existence. We're not all in this every day is the same and that we've kind of created falsely in Western culture. But then actually we're still moved as humans by these energetic waves and solar flares and astrological movements, but we pretend that we're not, and we don't understand why one day we feel different to the next day, to the day before. And then we think it's just us.
Yeah. And then we judge that.
Yeah.
And then
we get medicated or something.
Yeah, exactly. We shut that down. It's like it's not allowed to be in that self-judgment and judgment of others in relation to that. And it's like, yes, we have the shadow, we have the light, we have it. It's all inside of us. And in the analysis of the dreams in the actual culture, it's always the opposite. So you dream about humans, it's about the animal world. And you dream about animals, it's about the human world. And that guidance is very, very real and very immediate. And, you know, they also obviously use plant medicine. Obviously, they use plant medicine as well. And we partook of beautiful tobacco just before, you know, for the Achua, the visions that they get through ayahuasca. There's the three most sacred plants for them are Floripondio or Datura, which looks like that lovely, beautiful bell-like flower you see in gardens often, that's now been taken from the Amazon to, you see them in English gardens, which is a very powerful hallucinogen. And that's normally done, when a man is about 20 years old and going off the rails a bit, which even they do in actual culture, and the elders will be like, right, the plants will now teach you. So they call it it's like punishment, but it's a spiritual connection at the same time. It's like you're not being a correct Achua. You know, it's interesting learning what is a correct person. You know, you're learning about it from babyhood around the fire in Wayusa Hour. You're learning about the dreams. You're learning about what it means to be, you know, a good Achua, a good member of the community, what the spirituality is, what the plants are, all these things. And then you'll have your Floripondio Datura ceremony, which can be, you know, it can break your brain. It can kill you. But that happens very, very rarely. With indigenous cultures, often if Westerners try and go and do it, it can be very problematic because we haven't had those, you know, lifetime of preparations, in fact, generations of preparation to do that. And when speaking to young Achua men who've been through that, it is remarkable, the shift, and speaking to people about the boys that have been through that it was night and day before that the plants, the spirits showed them very clearly the error of their ways, the root of it, and transmuted that. You know, so whether it be a man, you know, a dear friend of mine, the way he speaks about it, he married a woman and he couldn't stop beating her. And he said, but I loved her and I didn't understand why I beat her. And so her family said, you're going to go and drink Floripondio. And so he went off, and it's 4 days alone in the forest under the influence of Floripondio. And he was shown very clearly, you know, why and how and what of this way of being that he was engaging in, that he hated in himself. And he came out of that experience. He said, I never raised a hand to her again. And she loves me now. And they're now married, happily married with 6 children. Mm. And, you know, you look back from a psychological perspective and you see, wait, his father was one of the greatest warlords in that region. He had 8 wives. You know, he would punish all of the wives if one wife did something wrong. Many of the wives of from warriors he killed. You know, of course, a child from that lineage will have great, great trauma. Of course, if he'd seen that, you know, and he didn't go to therapy. He went to the plant that is, you know, from his landscape, and that, you know, transformed his way of being. And I think, you know, ayahuasca is very, very well known, obviously, but it's from the Amazon, and it's from, I think that people need to know the context of where the plants come from. The Amazon is a harsh environment. It's from many of the nations are warrior nations. They're strong people. The only reason that they're alive to this day because their ancestors have been warriors and have been through hell. And therefore, you know, ayahuasca can be quite tough and wonderful and healing and powerful. I've had beautiful healings with ayahuasca, but then there's beautiful tobacco as well, which we had, which is, you know, gentler. Actually, it's not always gentler. If you drink it, it can be pretty ungentle. But it shows you the way, it shows you the path, it shows you how to get towards your visions and your dreams. And, you know, living in a culture where, you know, the solution is always to go to God, you know, always to go to the, you know, God in the form of the plants, to the great K-pop trees that are revered like shamans, the wisdom that they hold, the grandfather trees, the waterfalls that we experienced this morning. I love going to the waterfalls, that cleansing, that, and that's where for the Achwa, that's where Rutam, the spirit of the forest, dwells in the waterfalls and the kapok trees, which is the best place to do ceremony. So you're getting the wisdom of the plants, you're getting the spiritual energy of that landscape into your system during the ceremonies, which is so beautiful. Sorry, that was a bit of a waffle.
Please don't apologize. Yeah. I mean, in Bali, the answer doesn't really matter what the question is. It's always ceremony, water purification, offer it up, come back to that place of connection. And I feel that what is so potent about it is that it's so physical and it's so imbibed in nature and in the surroundings. We just don't have that same connection of possibility within. There are, like in England, for example, there are some really beautiful springs, but there's not a lot of them. And there's not a lot where there's a really deep practice of people going to the spring, like such as they do, say, with the White Spring in Glastonbury, where I go often. But it's not that we have that in every single town. So that there's that space to keep going and cleansing and purifying.
It's very interesting for me after living in the Amazon for so many years and then going back to, it gave me a greater love of because I'd sort of run away from England as soon as I could. I was out of there. And I lived in Australia for many years, and I lived in the Amazon, I lived in the States for many years. And the more that I spent time with the Achwa and taking part in their rituals and their ceremonies and their connection with, the rivers and the trees and the lakes, the more I started to question, but wait, what is my cultural heritage? Where do I come from? And I did one of those 23andMe DNA tests, and I'm like 99.9 from England. And I was like, no, I want to be something more interesting. I'm like, what does that mean? What does that mean? More interesting than England? And then it was like, well, no, I'm really, really of this land. I really need to go and look at my connection with that landscape. And I ran away from it for so many reasons, family of origin stuff, trauma stuff, wanting to make my way in the world, whatever. And then it was interesting when I got pregnant with my daughter and I was in the States, and I was like, I need to go home. I need to go back to England. And I'd have a very sort of fractious relationship with England and family and old belief systems and I hadn't been able to live comfortably in England. I'd last for about 10 days and it would shoot me out again. When I was pregnant with Artemis, it was like, well, you're going back home. And I was like, well, how am I going to, because the jungle and living with people who have that connection with the forest and witnessing another way of being every single day was just so incredible. And it transformed me and healed me on such a deep, deep, deep level that I was like, I can't be away from that for a long period of time. And then going back to England, I was like, well, what does this look like here in this landscape? And it was remarkable. I lived back in my ancestral village, the one that I grew up with as a child. I had my baby there, just walking out in that landscape. And I asked that landscape, I was like, what does this look like? And I live very close to Stonehenge. So I would walk to Stonehenge every day and sit and, no one really knows what went on there but I sat there going, I know this is a powerful place of worship. Guide me and I'm here, help, what do I do? Just taking that reverence for a tree. There was an oak tree that I particularly thought was beautiful and had this yummy, was drawn to it. And that became like my oak tree and became my child's oak tree. She refers to it as my oak tree now, because I would sit there and meditate at the base of it, and I'd do little offerings and I'd offer prayers to it, and they were messy and I don't know if they were right, but it was like my soul, in its messy way, wanting to reconnect with the land of my birth. And the yew trees, we've got a beautiful yew tree by in our churchyard, which many churchyards do, because that was the pagan roots of where the church was placed there. Even going and just standing or cuddling it, sitting with your back to it, show me the way. And I think we can reawaken that connection and reawaken those rituals, those ceremonies, and we can make our new ones. And I'm so lucky to live right near Blickmead, which is Stonehenge Spring, so I can again walk there from my house. And
it's incredible.
Isn't it just magical?
Crystalline and powerful.
And she's under great threat right now. And this is just, I think it's so indicative of our times where one of the oldest sites of worship in all of the British Isles, Blickmead, which many of your listeners will know about, some don't. This is potentially why Stonehenge was built where it was its proximity to Blickmead, which is a feminine, beautiful spring. It's a place of fertility. I was on a couple of archaeological digs there, and I couldn't believe it I saw auroch footprints. So auroch are, prehistoric cattle, and they were symbols of fertility, and they were worshipped. We could see altars around these footprints and birthing tools. So this spring was a place where people would gather for fertility and for mating rituals, and they would scatter out into the plains of Salisbury, and then the women would come back there to birth. It's such a powerful place. And wonderfully, I've been, able to bring many of my Indigenous friends who come from the forest to England to speak on behalf of the forest to Blickmead. And it was it's just incredible to be there with, an Amazonian shaman who can speak to the spirits of Blickmead. And I took him to West Kennet Longbarrow and Silbury Hill and Stonehenge and these ancient places. And he still could speak to the spirits. He still could speak to that landscape. And so I think for we who live in the United States, in the British Isles, and wherever, there are people that remember how to do that, and we can remember that. And, we know many people in common who are sort of at that renaissance of, reawakening the springs, the wells, singing, and I just say to everyone, just give it a go, even if it feels silly. Like, often I've got a terrible singing voice, but when I go to that spring, I sing to her because I know that it feels right, and I know that I feel great, and maybe she's feeling different, but it's like we can find that new path, and I think many of us are. You must come down and come and visit.
Absolutely. Well, I have been there with our friends, yes, Charlotte Pulver, yes, Chris Park, Sam Lee, that have all been on this podcast before and are known to this community. And, and there are so many other wisdom keepers of that land. Yes. And I feel like what's alive for me is just that if we allow ourselves to remember that as humans, no matter what kind of body we're in or where our family is from or where we were born, we all have this ability to speak to spirit, to listen to spirit, to be in conversation with spirit, that is being human. Mm-hmm. And therefore, that is the bit that we need to remember. And it's not just special people that can do it. It's everyone. And of course, there are people like just with every single spectrum that it's more natural for, or that can go deeper in a certain way. But everyone can do it. Mm-hmm. Of course, the way in which one hears will be different. And just like everything else, if you ask a bunch of humans to draw a lemon, you're going to get so many different interpretations of a lemon. And so there's such an important process that we are in right now of reclaiming our intuition, reclaiming and re-remembering that we all have that skill within us and that we have to practice it. And sometimes that means going to other cultures that can show us how. And sometimes it means just going into our garden and having the confidence, letting go of any shame and just doing it and letting it be a bit messy and imperfect, but trusting that actually we know how to do it. Mm-hmm. It's actually not so complicated to make an offering, to share our voice, to listen for any whispers. And if more of us do that, then what happens in the world? I mean, whew.
Yeah, I mean, that transformation in a millisecond, we know that. And again, like, it could be exactly as you said, in your own garden with a plant you like. Like, we are nature. It can be tiny. It can be on the bus. It doesn't have to be, on a mountaintop in Tibet. It's like, it can be so mundane and so powerful. It's always so interesting. I lead trips to the forest once a year, and I've been doing that since when I first started going. And people are like, what exactly are you doing? Why did you disappear off into the forest? And so I started doing, just taking a couple of friends, and then it's grown over the years. And it's really beautiful to see what happens when people get that, deep immersion. And again, here in Bali, it's not necessarily just in the Amazon, but just being amongst a community of other humans who have such deep reverence and connection with the divine and with nature, and how it just blasts your heart open. It's just, and that could be going to Plum Village. It could be, so many different ways, just to be around those that walk in that way of being. And
we were just in India together.
Yes.
And I mean, it's everywhere. There's this that we're talking about. It's human,
yes.
and it is everywhere.
Yeah. And then you can bring it back to your life, and it's not just in that altar. It's not just in front of that guru. It's not just in front of that particular tree in the middle of the forest. It's a gateway drug. It's like having an experience. I remember, I've been in many waterfalls, but the first time I had this incredible experience in a waterfall in the Amazon, where I deeply felt in a tobacco ceremony, this beautiful connection with Arusha, the spirit of the forest, the cathedral of wild nature god, whatever you want to call it, and just that utter surrender and this feeling of wholeness and love, and something I've been looking for everywhere. Do you know what I mean? And just it was quiet. It wasn't like, it's like, I'm enough, I'm okay, I'll do as is, and I just started giggling. I'm there with the water splashing on my head, and just like, I was like, yes, this is it. Thank you. And so for me, that happened there, but I can always tap into that feeling. Was it in the Ganesha temple in Vellore, or, when you have those.
In the Narayan temple with the anthill.
Yes.
And the old goddess. It was just the little sanctum that was tended to by the women.
Yes.
I walked in there and I came out a different person.
It's like, boom.
Yeah.
And that, anytime, anywhere, you can take a breath, close your eyes, take a breath, and touch that moment and feel how your body and your soul felt in that place. And I can go back under that waterfall, like just that. And so it's there with us, and for me, because because of the nature of my upbringing, whatever, that I blast out into my head, and I get very, very fast, and it's like just that calming the nervous system in whatever way we can, enough to take that breath, and enough to then go, okay, I'm back under the waterfall, I'm back by the anthill, and then it's back in your body again, it's back in the system, because it's just a re-remembering of that beautiful connection.
And those moments never happen when we're in our head or in any kind of expectation of it. And that is also the art of this way, is learning how to enter into sacred space, but knowing that sacred space is anywhere, is everywhere, and being able to be open, to be moved, to be transformed, because it's often a process. Sometimes it just like comes in and like shing, it's there. But other times, like in that Shaktipat experience that I had in Vellore, in that temple, it wasn't like I walked in and I felt the energy, and it was like there was something happening, and this little sanctum of this temple is a womb. And they said, as you go in, be open. And I went in with full openness, and there was a group of us, and so we were in a circle around the anthill, and I ended up directly behind the statue of the goddess, and I just started to shake. And it would be very easy to stop that movement, but it's actually allowing that movement. And as I allowed that movement, the shaking continued, and it got fiercer, and then something happened, and then and one of my friends there said, I watched your face just completely change during that whole, like, you just, and your energy field, and it's something, something came in. And I walked out and I burst into tears, and I released something, and whether it's mine or whether it was something of this earth and this time, who knows, who cares, but I was able to surrender into the process and be open to being transformed, and be open to transmuting. And that is it. And then it doesn't matter if you're meditating, or if you're in a ceremony with a plant medicine, or if you're sitting under an oak tree.
that it can, and it can happen any moment.
And we all have energies that we are more drawn to, that call us, that become part of us. Like, this is my 8th year with my love of Bali. And as soon as I arrived on this land, just the pull to come back. And every time so much shifts and transforms for me here. And I hear that with you and Bali and the Amazon, and so for some of us, we are sent far, and for others, it's always just like there on the doorstep, and it's both, and it's all, and it's and.
Yeah. And you see that with the, with the Balinese people and the Ibu who works here and does the offerings. Like, she's never left this area in her life. Her whole life has been in this Banjar, which is the local village, doing her offerings, doing, her devotion at the temple. And it's her daily life, whereas some of us have to, have to travel far on pilgrimage to these places. I love.
And I feel with that, it's learning to really listen to the whispers of our soul, so that we don't just consume experiences. And we are in a culture of that, especially with medicines such as ayahuasca, and needing to go to everything and this ceremony and that and this and that, and having that ability to really listen and to tune in, so that we're not just bouncing around in this ungrounded way, but actually we're able to really connect to, like, what is it that we need. We're also able to say no and miss out on an experience that maybe our friends or our community had just to be able to really tune in to what it is that we need at a certain time, or where are we being called, and to check in with that relationship with greed and consuming versus experiencing and transmuting, and we've all got that wrong at different moments.
Totally. Yes.
And there's always then a messy integration when we don't listen.
And I think that's the thing. I think it's like creating that space to truly listen to your own intuition, because particularly, you mentioned ayahuasca, the Atwa say that once you do, some of the Atwa have done ayahuasca 3 times in their lives. They do it at very key turning points, and they do it with a very trusted elder. Like, I'm so lucky that I get to be able to go to the Amazon, and the times that I've drunk with, shamans with thousands of years of lineage, who I know will protect me energetically and spiritually, and I'm very, very lucky to have that experience. They find it bizarre that people would do it as many times as some of the Westerns do it. They say golosos, like we're greedy for it. It's a Spanish word. Goloso is like greedy in Spanish. It's like more. And in the spiritual world, more is not necessarily better. They say you've got to leave ayahuasca her time to do the work, and it can take years. And they know when she's finished the work, and then they can drink again. Whereas I think, again, it's our addictive, more is better. And sometimes we need to take homeopathic quantities of things just to touch and then feel, because again, it can get into that not wanting to feel the feelings. I'm going to do another ceremony. I'm going to transform deeply. It's going to be really hard. I'm really doing the work. And sometimes doing the work is resting. And I've learned that the hard way, on my journey of evolution. I had a lot to work on, more than many. So I was like, I dived into, anything spiritually, psychologically, workshops, retreats, got to do this, got to do that, and then I've now got to the point now, it's like, guess what? The work now for me is to sit still for half an hour and do nothing. That is the hardest thing for me. If you said to me, you'll become a better person, you'll be free of shame and fear if you climb Mount Everest on your knees, I'd be like, right, let's go. Come on, or like something really hard. Stick your hand, there's that glove with the bullet ants that you've seen in the Amazon. I'm like, bring it on, if that's what will take me somewhere. And sometimes it's in the gentleness and in the tenderness, and the way that we treat the earth is so violent in so many times, and the way we treat our own souls and our own beings is so violent. And how do we transform our behavior to ourselves so it's gentle and loving? And then we'll make those decisions to our families, our friends, our society and to the earth.
Absolutely. And there is a huge shadow within the spiritual community of being incredibly selfish and not able to understand how one's actions affect others around them. And actually, if true spirituality is the interconnection and understanding how we're in this together, then having that maturity to really understand how we impact others and how we can show up with more kindness and love and clearer communication, and all of that is the work. And if we're constantly in a washing machine of our own, because we're actually taking too much everywhere and always in some epic process, then there's something gets missed. What a lot of this is about, which is attuning to live more fully and presently in this world, and to bring more of our full self, which happens to be mystical and all of the above. And then actually it can happen in a way where it's not rooted in the selfishness, but is actually truly soulful.
And it's interesting, I see, again, referring back to the actor again, that growing up in a culture where everybody's very, very clear that the individual affects the whole, that what one person does within a community can affect the whole community, living or dying, and when it's that like life or death, it sort of shifts the way that you look at the world and the way that you show up, and and that's the truth of everything. Like there's the wings of a butterfly, it's like everything we do will affect another. Just again, going back to that kindness and love to oneself allows us to be kind and loving to those around us, and to realize that the people who, when I'm being selfish, it's because something's out of whack inside, and so if I tend to those wounded parts of myself, I'm able to show up better for you. Do you know what I mean? I'm able to hear you. I'm better able to have the courage to communicate. And then it goes out to the massive, then back to the minutiae again.
Oh, Zoe, we could be here for hours, but to honour not being selfish and,
yes.
and showing up for what we have to show up for next, I would love to just close by asking you, what is your call to action that you want to leave our friends listening with? And there can be one that's more of the inner nature, and one that is very practical and maybe supporting something in the world.
Cool. Thank you. I think always the inner nature one would be go spend some time in nature. That would be a call to action. Like, whatever we're doing, we can get so into our screens, even if we're working in the environmental field or the screens are such a big part of our lives, but to get out and connect with nature. And that can be a pot plant on your shelf in your kitchen, or if you can, to go and sit under a great oak tree, or any one of the trees nearby you in a park or in your garden or in the wilderness, and ask how you can be of service, how you can be part of the whole, what you can do going forward, and listen for the answers. And I need to do that. I need to take my own medicine, which I'm going to do this afternoon. I'm going to go and listen to my own medicine. And then, a call to action in the external world. If people are interested in learning, more about what's going on in the Amazon, there's another great initiative that I'm also an ambassador for called the Sacred Headwaters Initiative. I think it's sacredheadwaters.org. I can give you...
We'll add it into the show notes.
Yeah, there's beautiful... And then there's gorgeous Jaguar credits. Go check those out. Check out what they're doing. And, and go and look for community-driven projects that are creating the world that you want to see. The Sacred Headwaters Initiative is combining, I think it's 60 different indigenous nations across Ecuador and Peru in a cohesive whole, all standing together to stop extractive industries in their territory. And it's the sacred headwaters. It's not just the biological headwaters of the Amazon, but it's taking into account the profound significance and importance of the sacredness of that landscape and keeping it intact for the indigenous people who currently live there, but for all future generations. And those are really exciting. So maybe going and checking out those guys, then people can also come to the Amazon with me once. We only take very small groups, but my next one is in July, but it's only 8 people. But yeah, go and connect with nature.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Zoe.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so yummy spending the day with you in ceremony, in prayer, and in chat.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And will you share your websites as well?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll share everything in the show notes, but it's nice for people to hear them.
Okay.
How they can connect in deeper with you.
Well, I need to refine these because I made my website many, many years ago and haven't updated it, but it's
I feel you.
I'm like,
mine is very...
Mine has not been tended to.
A very different human being that doesn't exist anymore.
Totally, exactly. I was a touch younger then. It's www.zoetryon.com and then oneofthetribejourneys.com as well. But that's just the Ecuador trips that I do. And then my Instagram is @ZoeTryon, and there I have more links to other incredible organizations and Amazon-based projects and wonderful Amazon heroes and heroines that you can go through there and then get to find them. So you can sort of dig deep and find incredible humans that I'm deeply inspired by doing wonderful work in the world.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for listening. We hope that you have enjoyed this episode and it has sparked some inspiration and creativity in you. As always, you can find links to everything we mention in this episode, download our book, and discover so much more over on allthatweare.org. We give space to our guests to share their perspective without debating it or fact-checking, as this approach allows for deep, unedited conversations from the heart. We trust your discernment and wisdom to take what is useful and challenge what isn't in your own understanding. We offer spaces for discussion and integration in our membership community, which we would love for you to join. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast, and so it's made possible by you, our beautiful community. If you loved this and would like to connect more deeply with us, please join our membership. You choose what you contribute based on our sliding scale, and you become a patron whose support makes this podcast happen, as well as receiving access to a library of many resources and invitations to nourishing events. Please also hit subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen so others can find us. This podcast is made by an all-female global team. Me, Amisha Gadiali, producer and host, Anna Greta Folderbach, who crafts the words that accompany each episode, and Mary Chan, who edits the sound so skillfully. All That We Are celebrates all that we are already and the untapped potential that lives inside us. It invites the full power of the more than human world, nature, the unseen, our ancestors, and our future generations. It reminds us that we never exist in silo, through borders, timelines, or polarity, that in each and every moment, all that we are is here.